The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. Will slow growth and lower inflation prompt the Bank of England to cut interest rates tomorrow? What it means for you? Can a new North Sea transition task force navigate the murky waters towards net zero? And British Airways defends its decision to make major changes to its frequent flyer loyalty scheme. A very good afternoon and welcome to Business Live on this Wednesday with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, December's surprise fall in inflation has increased the probability that the Bank of England will drop the base rate of interest for a third time in 6 months when the Monetary Policy Committee meets tomorrow. But whilst the decision will be a relief to borrowers and businesses, will it have the desired effect of coaxing more growth out of the British economy? Well, let's speak to Sian Rathathai, who is a senior economist at Vanguard and joins us this afternoon. We are expecting an interest rate cut tomorrow, aren't we?
Yes, that's correct. It's pretty consensus now that the Bank of England will cut rates by 0.25% to leave the bank rate at 4.5%. And
as I say, that is happening because the Bank of England believe that inflation is somewhat under control and are now more concerned about growth.
Yes, well, really, the Bank of England are stuck between a rock and a hard place because the economy is really vibing stagflation. The survey data suggests that inflation is actually going to tick up in the short term. But what they're really doing is attaching more weight to the downbeat growth and employment numbers that have come through the pipe in recent weeks.
And Sian, we know that the bank has always kind of relatively divided on these things. Talk us through the kind of the doves and the hawks, if you like. Where is the view inside the MPC?
Yeah, so I think you're going to get probably one or maybe two dissenters at the vote tomorrow. I don't think it'll be too controversial, at least at this month's meeting. But further down the track, I do think you're likely to get a split, which widens as these growth and inflation trade-offs start to build into the picture.
And we expected this rate decision and have been doing for a little while, but there is growing expectations that this might not be the end of it this year, that we could see further cuts. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So at Vanguard, our base case is actually we'll get 4 cuts this year, which will leave bank rate at 3.75% by the end of the year. So a bit lower than where we are now, but still in what we would call restrictive territory.
And why are we expecting that? Why, as you say, inflation could well tick up? What's the thought process behind those further cuts, I should say?
Yeah, so the MPC at the Bank of England will likely look through the short-term noise with the inflation data and focus a lot more on the real deterioration momentum, both in economic growth, but also in the labour market. You're starting to get a lot of surveys suggesting that employment is going to start slowing down, hiring tensions are going to freeze. And given that context, the bank has one eye on protecting the economy from a prolonged slowdown.
Now, there'll be a lot of people watching at home not worried that much about the macro situation. They'll be thinking, as a homeowner, what does this mean for my mortgage rates? And if you've got money in the bank, what it means if you're a saver.
Yes, that's correct. And there's really two sides of the same coin. Many homeowners with big mortgages will, I guess, welcome the news because you're getting a lower interest rate environment. But at the same time, particularly the older part of the population and homeowners who don't have a mortgage have been reaping the rewards of high interest rates. And that has now become a bit less rewarding with rates falling.
And Sian, this is in contrast to what we think may well happen. Is this right in the United States, where actually the Fed are less likely now, we think, to cut interest rates?
That's correct. I mean, I think the growth and inflation impulse in the United States is just a bit stronger than it is in the United Kingdom right now. And so we'd expect a much slower pace of easing for the Fed from now on. And at Vanguard, the house view is that the Fed funds rate won't go below 4% this year. So maybe a maximum of 1 or 2 cuts later this year expected for the Fed.
And this obviously is in a world in which we've got a lot of disruption. there's been a big discussion this week, hasn't there, about tariffs, the impact that could have on the global economy. Those members of the MPC will be very aware of the fact that 2025 could be a pretty turbulent year.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a huge amount of uncertainty at the moment, particularly on the supply side of the economy. You talk about tariffs and trade tensions, also in global energy markets, and also with labor supply. A huge number of different supply side risks, which really does cloud the outlook for policymakers this year.
OK, Shan, really appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Shan Rathatha, who's the senior economist at Vanguard. And we're expecting that decision, of course, from the Bank of England at midday tomorrow. And we'll have full coverage with that, of course, with Ed Conway when that comes in at midday here on Sky News. Now, let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the day's business news now. And music streaming service Spotify has announced its first ever annual profit, 16 years after it launched. A rise in paying subscribers helped to lift revenues by 16% to £3.5 billion. The Swedish firm also said overall that user numbers had reached a record 675 million. Santander's annual profits in the UK fell by 38% as speculation continues over the potential closure of its British business. The Spanish-owned bank reported a fall in pre-tax profits to 1.33 billion for 2024 due to higher saving rates and a provision for possible motor finance mis-selling. Sales of electric vehicles grew by 34% in January compared to the same period last year. More than 1 in 5 new cars was an EV. That's the highest ever January figure. The rise was driven by a strong performance from traditional European car makers despite competition from China. And don't forget, you can get more on that and indeed the rest of the business news by just scanning the QR codes to access our Money blog that's on screen now. Now, as the government grapples with the higher wire acts of balancing the need for growth or the commitment to reach net zero by the end of the decade, a new task force has been set up to oversee the transition of North Sea's oil and gas fields to a renewable future. One of the hot topics for discussion for the new North Sea Transition Task Force is whether the major Rosebank oil and gas development should go ahead. Well, let's speak to Alex Veitch. He's Director of Policy at the British Chambers of Commerce and joins us this afternoon. Alex, very good afternoon to you. It got brought up in Prime Minister's Question Time today, didn't it? Talk us through what is at play here.
Well, what's at play is the future of our energy industry. What's at play is meeting our climate targets. And what's at play is prosperity of not only the northeast of Scotland, but the many thousands of companies across the UK that rely on oil and gas for their livelihoods. And so the whole future of where we get our energy from, how much we use, what alternative energy sources we need, that really is all to play for at the moment. And we think, what we think is by pulling together a task force that we're organising with many stakeholders across the piece, we can help inform government and advise on what a common beneficial future for the North Sea could look like.
And you talked, though, didn't you, that what is at stake here is quite big, let's be frank about it, the future of the North Sea, but also thousands of jobs. And, this is quite a political decision, isn't it, in some regards?
Well, it's hard to take politics out of decision-making. I think as regards the big ticket items in the North Sea, one of the things that's been in the news recently is the Rosebank oil field and whether or not to proceed with it. We think it's quite right that a development like this must meet all of its legal targets and go through all appropriate environmental scrutiny before it's finally signed off. And we think that's a common sense approach. I think it is fair to say that our view is that we will continue to be using oil and gas for some time, and that while we transition to a new energy future, it's vitally important not to lose the offshore energy expertise that's been built up in this country over many years. And again, that's not just in the northeast of Scotland, that's all across the UK, where there's a huge supply chain that feeds into these very difficult high-tech engineering jobs off the north coast of Scotland.
Yeah, and of course, this is at a time also when we know the government is saying we're trying to go for economic growth almost at all costs.
Well, almost at all costs.
Yeah.
That's maybe a little bit. Maybe that's what the government might be hinting at. I'm not sure, but I think.
Well, I say that not in a facetious way, Alex. As in, like,
Yeah.
that's what they claim. They claim that they don't want obstacles. You're not convinced by that, clearly.
Well, look, well, I can say what we think with clarity, which is that we support measures to increase economic growth. Of course we do. We support infrastructure investments. We support the continued use of oil and gas in this country while we transition to an energy future. We support we do support new projects, be they airports, be they bridges, even be that if they're oil and gas fields, if they meet the appropriate legal and policy safeguards around environmental protection. And that's what's happened to Rosebank. It's gone back. They have to do a new environmental assessment, and that is fine. They will have to come back and show how they can do this within our climate targets. And that, at the end of the day, it's for government to say, yes, these energy developments can be done, and the other developments we're hearing about too. So I'm not sure it's the government's position is growth at all costs. That's probably a question for them. But I think our position is that growth with environment and financial sustainability at its heart, and that will be sustainable growth and sustainable development.
OK, Alex, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
In the last couple of minutes coming into us at Sky News, and that is that Swedish media are naming the suspects involved in that horrific shooting yesterday as Rickard Andersson, who's aged 35 years old. The worst shooting disaster Sweden has ever seen. 11 people dead. Police naming, or sorry, Swedish media should say, naming that suspect as Rickard Andersson. Again, we heard from the police yesterday, they weren't entirely sure what the motivation was, but that is the person, the suspect that Swedish media have named is behind the worst ever shooting that the country had seen. And we'll have more from Sweden a little later on in the programme. Now, British Airways has defended its decision to make changes to its loyalty scheme after being accused of washing its hands of leisure travellers in favour of business class frequent flyers. Instead of collecting points based on miles travelled, the scheme members will now be awarded a point for every pound spent. Let's speak to Rob Burgess. He's the editor and founder of frequent flyer website Head for Points and can explain all. Rob, just I think before we get on to today's news, just explain the changes that British Airways were making to the loyalty scheme.
Okay, put very simply, going forward, you'll need to spend £20,000 plus taxes and charges, so probably about £30,000 gross during a year to get a British Airways Gold card, which gives you full access to the lounges at Heathrow, fast track, priority security, etc. And a more mid-tier silver card, similar benefits, lower quality lounges. Well, you'll need to spend around £10,000, £15,000 gross on British Airways tickets in a year to get that. Now, that's a massive jump from what it could have been done for at the moment. I mean, it is possible to earn a gold card for £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 of spending if you're buying the right sort of tickets on the right sort of planes, and a silver card for under £2,000. I think the key with these changes is that a lot of people put up with a lot from British Airways in terms of product, punctuality, etc., because they knew if they did 4 or 5 flights a year, they'd get a silver card, they get lounge access, fast track, etc., and it made the whole package worthwhile. And a lot of our readers now are saying, if you're basically going to make it impossible for a leisure traveller or a small business traveller or even a low-level normal corporate traveller to earn status, then we're going to go off and we're actually going to look for the best flight, best timing, best price, best quality, best food, whatever,
Yeah.
to get where we want to go. And that sort of BA or anyone else questions what goes away with it.
So what's the thought process here? Why do British Airways want to change things? I mean, they're making a lot of money. You know, is it simply about money?
I think it's about money to some extent, but there's obviously a very easy line you can take, which means, oh, if we stop giving these people status, then we can start charging them for seat selection, start charging them for extra baggage, start charging them perhaps to go in a lounge, things they get for free at the moment. But and obviously you can do a nice PowerPoint slide for your boss showing why that might work. But I think that doesn't account for the fact that a lot of people fly the airline not because they love the airline, but because the airline plus the status benefits they get works out over the year. And frankly, for a lot of people, if there's no chance of earning status from the amount of flying that they do each year, then they'll become what I tend to call a free agent, and we'll just start looking at every single flight in terms of who's best for me on this particular day.
And just finally, Rob, I mean, there's been a massive backlash against this. There's been British Airways trying to row back a little bit. Do you think this is where it's going to land, if you like? No pun intended?
No, I don't think so. I think it's still very early days. The full changes don't kick in for another year. I mean, if you've already got your gold card in the bag for next year, people will keep flying the airline for another 12 months. They've got the benefit. They'd be silly not to.
Okay.
But I think as we get towards April 26 and people start looking at a future without status, then they'll start looking at what KLM, Air France, Lufthansa, lots of the other carriers operating directly from the UK to, points across the world have to offer.
OK, Rob, excellent stuff. Thank you very much indeed. British Airways there defending some of those changes they've made to the frequent flyer loyalty scheme. You're watching Business Live. Up next, it's the markets for Tee Up Today. Details after this break.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks, but taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back to Sky News and Business Live. Let's a close look at those movements in the markets this afternoon. Delighted to say we're joined by Guy Foster, Chief Strategist at RBC Brew and Dolphin. Guy, very good afternoon to you. We've spent a lot of this week, haven't we, talking about Trump and tariffs. China, Mexico, Canada haven't focused an awful lot on the EU. They, of course, have not been tariff yet. It's not a word, is it? But they've not had tariffs imposed on them. But there are suggestions that if they do, they're going to hit the tech companies.
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, there's been more than an idle threat, I think, from the US administration that tariffs apparently will be coming for the European Union. And obviously, the weakness that Europe has is its reliance on trade, the fact that it runs a big trade surplus with the US. These are the things that the Trump administration is extremely concerned or upset about. Because trade is a big part of the European economy, it means that Europe's quite vulnerable, and they have to look for the areas that they can hit back at the US if that's what it comes to. And obviously, the big thing that Europe buys from the US is technology. So I think that's the obvious place to target. I mean, the concerns or the accusations from the tech companies themselves is that it's already started. It was happening already in terms of the antitrust levies that Europe already been applying to the big tech companies.
Guy, let's talk about the streaming wars, if you like. Those big companies, American companies, primarily battling it out for us viewers. Disney had a great Christmas, and Netflix is thinking about chat shows and more sports to keep us subscribing.
Yeah, it's all about content, really, at the moment. I think that there is such a range of different streaming platforms for people to engage with that companies are really focusing on trying to maintain their pricing by expanding their offerings. So that's very much where their focus has been. And it does seem like, for the time being, at least, they're being reasonably successful in that.
And it is fascinating, this, because it is a real battle, isn't it? But it is one, just briefly, if you can, Guy, that Netflix is winning.
Yeah, they certainly seem to be. I mean, I think you're always looking at the subscriber numbers, particularly to see how they're holding up. And obviously, Netflix have changed their charging structure as well to offer a broader range to try and make sure that they can be relevant to a broader range of possible subscribers. And that does seem to be working.
It does indeed, yeah. They are doing very, very well indeed. Guy, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Guy Foster there joining us. Thank you. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for this afternoon. Thanks for your company. We're back, of course, tomorrow morning at 11:30, looking ahead to that Bank of England decision on interest rates at midday. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, including more on that breaking news in the last couple of minutes that Swedish media has named the shooter involved in yesterday's mass shooting. That's at 5. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.